The canyon greeted the morning with a hush so deep it felt sacred. Pale sunlight spilled slowly over the jagged rim, turning red rock into molten gold as shadows retreated inch by inch. Louis Calder stood near the edge, boots firm against gravel, surveying tools spread carefully at his feet. P had mapped valleys, plains, and rivers across 3 territories, but this canyon felt different older somehow, as if it resented being measured. He adjusted his tripod and checked his compass, marking bearings with deliberate care. Each line he drew on parchment felt like a quiet negotiation with the land. The territorial office wanted precision. Rail planners wanted access. Settlers wanted promises. Louis wanted accuracy. But lately, accuracy felt like betrayal. A sound broke the stillness. Hooves, slow and deliberate. Louis turned, hand instinctively hovering near his revolver. From the winding trail below emerged a woman leading a horse with practiced ease. Dust clung to her riding skirt, and her posture spoke of long days in the saddle. She moved as though the canyon belonged to her, not owned, but understood. She stopped several yards away, eyes sharp beneath the brim of her hat. "You're setting markers in the wrong place," she said calmly. Louis straightened, surprised more than offended. "According to my instruments, this is the boundary line." She stepped closer, gaze flicking from his compass to the stakes driven into stone. "According to the land, that line floods every spring. If cattle followed it, we'd lose half the herd." Louis hesitated. "And you would be?" "Zenab Halley." She rested a hand on her horse's neck. "My father's ranch depends on this canyon. Every inch of it." The name settled between them like a challenge. Louis had heard of the Hale Ranch, long established, fiercely protective of their water rights. "I'm not here to take anything," Louis said. "I'm here to record what already exists." Zenab studied him for a moment longer, then gave a short, humorless smile. "That's what they all say. First, the maps, then the fences." For words struck deeper than he expected. Louis looked back at his parchment, suddenly aware of how fragile the lines appeared against the vastness of the canyon. "Walk with me," Zenab said, already turning back toward the trail. "If you're going to draw this place, you should see it properly." After a brief pause, Louis gathered his tools and followed. They descended together, the canyon walls rising around them, echoing the crunch of their boots. Zenab pointed out narrow streams hidden by brush, rock formations shaped by decades of floods, paths animals followed instinctively. None of it appeared on Louis's charts. For the first time in years, he realized his maps were missing something essential. As the canyon echoed their footsteps, Louis sensed that these meetings, these shared paths, were only the beginning. Their encounters became impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Each morning, Louis arrived in the canyon with his tools packed neatly and his mind focused on measurements. And each morning, he found Zenab already there, moving through the land as if she had risen from it. Sometimes she stood knee-deep in brush checking water flow. Other times, she traced old cattle paths worn smooth by generations of hooves. At first, they worked separately, exchanging only brief nods of acknowledgement. Yet silence in the canyon had a way of pressing people together. Before long, questions slipped into conversation, and conversation turned into debate. "That line won't hold," Zenab said one afternoon, pointing at his map. "The spring runoff cuts straight across here." Louis crouched beside her, studying the ground. "The elevation says otherwise." "The elevation doesn't live here," she replied. He should have been offended. Instead, he found himself adjusting the angle of his compass, testing her claim. She was right. The rock bore faint scars from old floods, nearly invisible unless you knew how to look. They began comparing observations. Zenab showed him hidden water sources, places cattle instinctively avoided, narrow trails that only appeared after storms. Louis explained how maps influenced decisions far beyond the canyon, how a single line could determine where a road was built or where a fence would stand. For decades. One afternoon, clouds gathered suddenly overhead, dark and fast-moving. Zenab led Louis beneath a stone overhang just as rain began to fall. The canyon echoed with the sound, water racing down the walls in thin silver streams. "My father thinks maps are weapons," Zenab said quietly. as they watched the rain. Once the land is measured, someone always wants more. Louis considered her words. I used to think maps were neutral. Now, I'm not so sure. They stood close in the narrow shelter, the air thick with damp stone, and something unspoken. For the first time, Louis felt the weight of his work in a personal way. This wasn't just land, it was livelihood, memory, survival. When the storm passed, neither hurried to leave. From then on, their work overlapped deliberately. They shared midday meals, sketched side by side in the shade, and argued not angrily, but passionately about what the canyon needed and what it could endure. Louis found himself altering his drafts, incorporating Zenab's knowledge in ways his training never taught him. Zenab, in turn, began to see how careful mapping could protect the canyon from reckless claims. As the sun dipped low one evening, Zenab paused at the trailhead. There's a narrow pass deeper in, she said. I'm checking it tomorrow. You shouldn't go alone. Louis met her gaze, feeling the canyon hum quietly around them. Then, I won't. The canyon echoed their footsteps as they parted, already conspiring to bring them closer. The canyon felt different, watchful, as though it were holding its breath. Dark clouds clung to the distant sky, their shadows crawling slowly across the stone walls. Louis noticed it immediately as he adjusted his pack, his survey tools heavier than usual against his shoulders. You sure about this route? He asked, glancing toward the narrow pass ahead. Zenab nodded, though her expression was more serious than usual. It's safe in clear weather. After rain, it becomes unpredictable. They moved forward anyway, side by side, their horses left tethered. Farther back where the path widened, the pass narrowed quickly, canyon walls closing in until sunlight thinned into pale ribbons above them. The air smelled of wet stone and dust, sharp and metallic. Louis focused on his footing, but his awareness kept drifting to Zenab. Confidently, she navigated the uneven ground. Her hand occasionally brushed the rock wall, as if steadying both herself and the canyon. She belonged here, in a way Louis never had anywhere. A distant crack echoed overhead. Zenab froze. Did you hear that? Before Louis could answer, the sound came again, louder, this time followed by a thunderous roar. Rocks broke loose above them, tumbling down the narrow passage. Dust filled the air as stone slammed into stone, sealing the path behind them with brutal finality. Louis's heart hammered as silence returned, thick and suffocating. We're trapped, he said quietly. Zenab exhaled slowly, forcing calm into her voice. Not forever, but not today either. They assessed the damage together. The rockslide blocked their only clear exit, and the remaining path ahead dipped into deeper shadow. The sky above darkened as clouds gathered, the promise of rain heavy in the air. We'll need shelter, Zenab said. Night will come fast down here. They found a shallow alcove tucked into the canyon wall, barely wide enough for two people and their supplies. Louis helped gather fallen branches and scrub, while Zenab struck a fire with practiced efficiency. The small flame flickered weakly, but it was enough to push back the cold. As dusk settled, the canyon amplified every sound, the snap of firewood, the whistle of wind, the distant rumble of thunder. With nowhere to retreat, conversation came slowly, cautiously. Then all at once, Zenab spoke of her childhood in the canyon, learning to read the land before she could properly read books, understanding weather patterns the way others understood clocks. Louis shared stories of constant movement, of never staying long enough to leave footprints that mattered. I thought mapping places meant understanding them, he admitted, but I think I've been wrong. Zenab met his gaze, firelight dancing in her eyes. Understanding means listening. The land tells you when you belong. The temperature dropped sharply after nightfall. Zenab offered him a blanket without hesitation, their shoulders touching as they sat close to the fire. The contact sent a quiet warmth through Louis that had nothing to do with the flames. Above them, stars blinked into view through the narrow opening of the canyon, distant and endless, trapped between stone and sky. Louis realized something had shifted. Danger had stripped away pretense, leaving only truth behind. If they made it out, neither of them would be the same. Morning light crept cautiously into the narrow pass, spilling pale gold across broken stone and settled dust. Louis stirred first, his body stiff from the cold ground and restless sleep. For a moment, disorientation washed over him. Then memory returned, the rockslide, the fire, the quiet closeness that had lingered long after the flames burned low. Zenab was already awake, sitting near the canyon wall and studying the sky above. "The clouds are breaking," she said softly. "We may have a chance." They worked together, without speaking much. The rhythm of shared effort, easing tension that had built overnight. Zenab tested the stability of the rocks ahead, while Louis scouted higher ground, searching for a climbable route. It was Zenab who finally remembered an old path, more than a scar in the stone, used by her grandfather decades earlier. "It's risky," she admitted, "but it's our best option." Trust came easily now. Louis followed her lead, steadying her when loose gravel shifted beneath her boots, accepting her hand when the climb grew steep. Scraped palms and aching muscles were small prices to pay for progress. When they finally reached a ledge, high enough to see beyond the pass, relief hit them both at once. They laughed, then breathless, unguarded laughter that echoed wildly through the canyon. The return journey was slower, careful but safe. By the time they reached open ground, the sun stood high and warm, as if the canyon itself had released them back into the world. In the days that followed, something between them had undeniably changed. Their conversations deepened, carrying less caution and more honesty. Louis showed Zenab revised maps, lines softened and adjusted to reflect her knowledge of flood paths and grazing routes. "These boundaries protect the water," he explained. "They limit access without closing the canyon entirely." Zenab traced the lines with her finger. "You're protecting it." "I'm trying to," Louis said. For once, when Zenab's father examined the maps, his skepticism lingered, but it no longer carried hostility. He asked hard questions, tested Louis's resolve, and watched closely as the surveyor returned, day after day, not just to measure, but to listen. One evening, as the sky turned violet, and the canyon whispered with cooling air, Louis and Zenab stood overlooking the land that had bound them together. "I've spent my life moving from place to place," Louis said quietly, "never staying long enough to matter." Zenab looked at him, her expression steady. "You matter here." The words settled deep, heavier than any vow spoken aloud. The canyon echoed softly, as if marking the moment witness to a decision made not in fear or duty, but in belonging. The final marker was set beneath a wide open sky, its metal edge catching the sunlight as Louis pressed it firmly into the stone. He stepped back, surveying the canyon one last time, not as a stranger measuring distance, but as someone who finally understood the weight of what endured. The maps in his satchel were finished now, each line carefully reconsidered, each boundary shaped by knowledge earned rather than imposed. Zenab stood nearby, watching the canyon with a familiar stillness. She had walked these paths since childhood, yet today felt different. The land had been altered, not scarred, but acknowledged, protected in ways that paper alone could never guarantee. Word spread quickly through the territory. The survey passed official review, not without resistance, but with enough support to hold. Roads were redirected. Claims were denied. The canyon remained largely untouched, its water sources and grazing paths preserved for generations to come. Zenab's father said little when the decision arrived, but that evening he extended his hand to Louis in quiet acceptance. "You listened," he said simply. "That matters." Life settled into a steady rhythm after that. Louis no longer spoke of his next assignment with urgency. When new contracts came, he declined them with ease he hadn't known before. He spent his days walking the canyon alongside Zenab, learning its moods in every season, how the echoes changed after rain, how the wind sang differently at dusk. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the canyon walls in fire and shadow, Louis stopped along the ridge where they had first argued over lines in the dirt. He took Zenab's hand, grounding himself in the certainty of her presence. "I don't want to wander anymore," he said. "I want to stay where my work means something, and where my heart already is." Zenab smiled, eyes reflecting the fading light. "Then, stay. Let this place hold you the way it held me." There were no grand ceremonies, no crowds to witness their promises. They spoke them quietly, with the canyon listening. Vows shaped by survival, trust, and shared purpose. The wind carried their words outward, weaving them into the stone itself. Long after the sun disappeared, the echoes lingered, proof that some promises, once spoken, never truly fade. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.